I noticed that you posted this morning
Yeah.
you completed your first half marathon. So I read the post. So the half marathon, congratulations! Looks like you did what you set out to do. You finished a one goal, right?
Yeah.
But the post was interesting because you were talking about creating goal structures. One of the things you said in your quote was by having 2/3 of your goals in the range of what we should achieve, we work to what we are capable of achieving. And if 1/3 of our goals serving as more ambitious goals, stretch goals, we work the perfect line of ambition and realism. I thought that was really the transformative way of looking at things. I think sometimes we oversimplify our goals, and maybe sometimes we make them too big and these sorts of things. So goal setting and goal structuring, we're not really here to talk about that so much, but I would love to hear you kind of build on that. Obviously the experience of running the marathon and training up to it and preparation, but the goal setting that kind of drove you throughout that.
Yeah. I think I caught on to this by reading and learning more about the OKR framework
Yeah.
initially. So where you are setting higher level objectives, and then you have some measurable key results that if you check them, you kind of achieved your objective.
Right.
But based on theory and business theory, you should always kind of like aim for around 70% on your key result achievements. So if you're like 70% on the way, then you're actually happy.
Yeah.
So all the
Yeah.
key results in the framework has stretch built into them. But by knowing 70% is good, you're kind of like 2/3 of the way is
Yeah.
still good, and you have the ambitious stretch in there. And when you start to kind of take that to other type of goal setting, then you see how much sense that make, for instance, in training to a half marathon
Right. Yeah. Well,
from a motivational point of view.
yeah, I mean, it makes it something. You said it perfectly. The perfect line of ambition and realism. What I'm capable of, because you always want to make SMART goals, right? And part of
Yeah,
the SMART acronym is attainable. So that is a big part of setting our goals, I'm sure. And I think this plays well into how gamification can be a strategic component when in driving sales and results for businesses. But before we get into that deep conversation, which I definitely want to unpack with you, obviously, and talk about SalesScreen and what you guys are doing. So the marathon, like you had a certain goal. What were the goals, and did you hit all 3 of your goals?
uh, well, let's say it like that. I left there kind of happy, kind of disappointed, which I think is an everyday life for me because of the way I
Right.
set
Yeah.
goals. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, I was my first race, so I've done a half marathon before, but I never done it in a race setting.
Okay.
So obviously, my first goal to just complete that was pretty easy. But the second goal, that was like my apps were telling
It
me
was like
you
two
should finish by
hours
that
and
time.
something, right?
Yeah, 2 hours, 15 minutes. So I'm a big guy, and for me, this was a bit of a quick journey to even complete. But I finished at 2:08. So it was
Nice.
just in between like the ambitious goal and where the realistic goal was. And I
Right.
think that's I should
A
be
good
very
place to
happy with
be. You're
that.
happy.
It's a good
Exactly. To
place
your
to
point.
be,
Yep.
especially given that I was like, yeah, I caught a cold, so the full
Uh,
week running up to this, I didn't get to do anything, and I was pretty scared that I wouldn't even be able to finish. So I was happy with the overall outcome for sure.
well, way to push through and make it happen, right? Someone who gets sick leading up to something like that, that's an easy excuse to pull out. So,
Exactly.
but
I was
the bigger
considering it. I'm
question,
not gonna lie.
I'm sure you were. I mean, you got to pick your health first too. If you're really genuinely sick, running a half marathon can put extra wear and tear and subject yourself to other things. So taking that cautionary hat off, you know, all the way to the wall, right? We push everything through it. And I love that. And we're talking about effort here today and how gamification contests should be tied to effort, not always necessarily the outcome, right? We talked about that in our planning,
Exactly.
right? Cool. But last question on the marathon: will you run another one now? Or are you going to step to a full marathon? Like, is this going to become a thing for you now, or did it kind of scare you off?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we were 8 guys who ran together, and this is an annual thing.
Hmm.
But we're 15 in the group, so max 15. But hopefully, around 8 to 10 people will join every year for a new half marathon location. We
Awesome.
kind of do it as a boys trip, but also visit new places around the world. But there's one dream marathon that we're gonna do when we're 40 years old.
The
And
Dream
that's
Marathon,
New
is that what
York
it's called?
Marathon.
The New Year. Okay. Yep.
uh,
Yeah, that's the
so
ultimate.
that's absolutely happening. Yeah, at one
Cool.
point.
Well, I've never run a marathon. I'm jealous. Got me scoping out nearby marathons for sure. I would definitely start with like a 5K, something small before I get into the big boys like you're doing. So cool. Well, that says a lot. I mean, obviously, you are living the life of gamification and goal setting and these sorts of things and staying motivated, right? That's what we're here to talk about. So let's get into the origin story of SalesScreen, if you don't mind. I always like to unpack that first to create a context for the audience. You didn't necessarily set out to create SalesScreen. What was it, 2011? So it's been over 10 years, 11 years now, right? So that wasn't originally the plan. You pivoted focuses, product focus, and then ended up on gamification. So talk about that for the audience and how SalesScreen came to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was pretty set on creating a software business and a subscription business, but I didn't really know what to do to begin with. So I did what many first-time founders do. I did several mistakes. And one of them was to build a full-on SaaS application to replace corporate text message.
All
And
right.
this idea came from and the fact that there was a new technology at the time, the push notification. And I saw that this could replace text for corporates, and they're paying per text message. So there's a real business to be had here.
Right, right.
Again, nobody asked for this. Nobody really wanted this. I didn't really solve a pain point. So
So it
all
wasn't
the
like a
things
bunch
that
of
I
market
know
research
now,
happened or anything. It was
yeah,
okay.
I was really like just an engineer going at it with a gut feeling. And obviously, a year later, when we were finally ready to release, the text message became free of charge. So the whole business model
Boom.
fell apart. Like that's that. And
So talk
nobody
about that
again
moment though.
asked about it. So
Talk about that moment though. That is where a lot of people would be discouraged. It's like when we're talking about the
yeah,
race, you got sick leading up to it, very easily could have just pulled out. But you hung in there and you found a way to pivot. But talk about the mindset and what the fortitude. Was it your support system around you? What drove you to keep going forward instead of just throwing your hands up and saying, I did all this work for a year and now it's not. How did you maintain the wherewithal to turn that corner?
I think for me at the time, it was such a strong goal to build a business that could
Hmm.
survive on its own, and try to do that without really involving any investors at the time, like doing it by ourselves.
Oh,
So that drive was within me, and this was very early in the journey. So I was super motivated and just like, all right, then we'll find ways where we could be even better, so that it becomes a value add. So we're still like full of optimism,
right.
young. I think I was 23 at the time. So didn't have enough life experience to know how hard it
Life
was,
hadn't
but
beat you up that
that
much
was
yet.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was like that was a blessing in disguise. So we went at it, and we found a business that sent tons of text messages, and it was kind of like the yellow pages out of Norway. And they sent obviously a lot of text messages in their business, but they also did it internally. And the internal use case was really interesting because what they did is that they obviously sold quite a lot of ads. And they placed these ads and they sold them through field sales, and they also sold them through call centers. And every time somebody placed an ad, meaning they closed the deal, and it was really high pace, so this happened many times a day, they sent a text message to everyone in the company so that they would kind of like all the phones in the call center lit up and buzzed because it was 2011, 12. But also everyone in the field knew that somebody just closed a deal, and they're closing deals. It's possible I can do that too. So it kind of created a level of energy for them,
Right,
and it
right.
was a part of their culture. So they really did it to motivate the staff by telling them other people are succeeding, you can do it too.
Very
And this
strategic.
was kind of like the concept that we pivoted towards. We're like, okay, we can replace this text message that you're sending internally. You can also add more to it. So let's add a pie chart showing how much you sold compared to your colleagues today and how you're tracking towards your targets for the week. And those elements obviously became much better than the text message they did manually at that point.
Right.
And it gave them many more ways to kind of build up that excitement. And when you could see that you passed a colleague and you're above the middle mark and you're now on top of the leaderboard. So it really it came to us through that client relationship and our willingness to pivot and search for good use cases.
Interesting.
And we, together with them, they kept adding requests and we kept filtering them and did the things that we thought would be cool for this use case. So at one point they asked, hey, you guys now built this, corporate messaging application, now sales reporting tool, and you have so much data. Like, we would love to see that up on TV screens in office space. And we're like, wow, that's brilliant, And we're like, okay, let's try to do that. So we created our second software as a service, a digital signage. We integrated it with the corporate messaging, now sales reporting tool.
Right.
And together we created something beautiful, which really set the jungle telegraph in motion, because the moment we installed those TV screens in our office space, and every time somebody reported a sale for a mobile app, all the TVs, boom, lit up simultaneously, Eye of the Tiger playing or whatever, showing that off to everyone, really creating this next level energy and excitement, replacing not only like that gong bell that people rang, but also like the whiteboards that you used to have in the
yeah, we talked about that. Yes, I remember those well. Yep.
Yeah, all the sales stats were up on the TV now in real time. So this thing, like when salespeople quit their jobs and went to another place, they went to their manager and said, "You got to look into this."
Right.
Or when somebody visited, they were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." So without any marketing, not knowing anything about positioning, building sauce or anything like that, this started to spread, and we were able to organically just be profitable from day one and bootstrap. And it wasn't until we kind of like got our third or fourth or fifth client, all based on just word of mouth, we understood that, okay, we have found a product market fit there. So we need to start all over in proper engineering way. Let's build it from the scratch up and be the first ever sales motivation software.
Well, that's a big claim right there. I think that's a big point too, right? Like that's the first gamification platform for sales teams. Like that's a big call out, right? And it's you have receipts. You've been doing this since 2011. I think we saw a big surge of gamification. Some of your competitors, if you will, 2015, 2016, particularly in the sales development realm where I was at, you definitely saw that emergence. But yeah, the first, the OGs of the gamification game, if you will. So yeah, going from whiteboards, spreadsheets, bells, gongs to a more sports center like experience with, around the office, and the walkout song. I love that piece, right? So Eye of the Tiger, you mentioned, for some folks, some of us might have another song, but I love all those components. And the thing though, right, is if you haven't fully implemented it or haven't seen it, would you agree that there's the perception out there that people might look at this as something that's a nice to have, something that's more additive? But in reality, if you're truly trying to tap into motivation, and you're trying to really create an atmosphere that is a positive competitive environment, you need to have some sort of platform that facilitates that. The Salesforce dashboards that we have, great, and the CRM, the sales engagement platform dashboards, whether it be Sales Loft, Outreach, whatever, those reports, those dashboards, all the visualization tools, really, really good. But taking it to this next level of having the screens around the office and in a remote environment, which is a big turning point for this, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the
remote
environment
it is the ultimate. It's the ultimate nice to have, Derek. I'm not gonna lie. Like, if you're an enterprise sales team, for instance, someone working at let's say Oracle and closing 1 to 2 deals a year, like, do you truly need this? it's really nice. It's really cool to beam it up and visualize for everyone where you stand. It creates accountability, transparency in the organization,
Right.
and like people stepping into the office will see how you're performing immediately. So there's some value to that, of course, but it's ultimately nice. uh, you don't need to do that to sell your Oracle enterprise deals. But if you work in a contact center, if you work in a field as a real estate agent or something where your sales process is very short, so
Okay.
it's like high velocity type of volume of activity, and where the link between the business outcome, which is like closing that deal or building that pipeline, if you're, for instance, in an SDR team, and versus the input that you're doing. So let's say you're an SDR team, again, you add context to a sequence and you actually do cold calling and sending emails, and that
Right.
leads to meeting set, and that becomes SQL. So that could be the whole funnel, and that is pretty, like, let's say, short. So you're expected to do a certain level of volume every day, and then it becomes repetitive, a bit mundane, hard really to do day in and day out. You get a lot of rejections, a lot of no's, and it tears on your motivation. And for those customers, they've been with us since 2011,
Wow.
2012. They've been with this platform forever, because for them, turning off the TV screens and the celebrations and knowing how they stand, really catering to that celebration of the smaller wins and the recognition and the rewarding them when they actually do something great. Like if they miss that, it's like losing electricity. You
Wow.
need to call someone, like, how, where
The lights are out. We
this
don't know
thing,
what to
like,
do.
what
Yeah.
we're gonna do, because it becomes part of their DNA,
Yeah,
their
I can see
culture.
that.
And that's actually a good quote we got from one of our customers over at US Health Advisor. Asked him, what would you do if SalesScreen went away? They was like, I would call Bob and tell them, like, put the electricity back on, because that's
Yeah,
how
tell me when you need
important
to
it is for
call.
us.
We're ready to
so
write the check. So we need to turn this back on. No,
so it depends on who
I've
you are.
set it up and I've worked in those environments, and I've also been, dating myself a little bit. The manager who had an outside sales team that put up a whiteboard. I got the black strips so that it was like the ruler and had all
Nice.
perfectly lined up. I mean, they had companies at the time. I mean, this is, again, dating myself, mid 2000s, early 2010s, where they had companies that would come in to set up your whiteboard. Like that was a service that you could call in, and they would design your whiteboards according to whatever contest or tracking
There you
leaderboards,
go.
things that you were doing. And instead of putting that money into that, I just, spent a weekend. I'll never forget this. When I was at Verizon, I spent a weekend and just set up our whiteboard there in the office, meetings, pipeline, the stuff that we tracked commonly. And you fast forward 2016, first SDR team. Unfortunately, it wasn't SalesScreen, but set up a gamification platform, and we had multiple offices, right? And I think going to that model where you have satellites, and you're in your HQ there in Norway right now. You have an office, I would believe, in New York or in the States as
Yep.
well, right? So there you go. And that's what we had. We had SDRs in India, we had SDRs in London, we had SDRs in the US. And so the office and multiple screens would light up, and you could control the channel, right? Different screens
Mm-hmm.
had different channels, right? And I'm sure you can do something like that. You can literally have something like that in the lobby if you wanted to, but
Yeah, absolutely.
we couldn't get away from it. Once it was up and it was in and people started experiencing it, CEOs walking by that didn't even know we had set it up were like, what is this? This is awesome. You're right. And investors, partners, it creates a buzz, not just for those that are in the office, but anybody who interacts with them. So big fan on my end. And but yeah, I think if you don't understand the strategic components of rolling out contests and gamification, that's where we get into low adoption, maybe low yield in terms of the results that you would get from it. So talk to us about what the science behind some of this. And you have personality types, gamer personality types that you'll talk to the audience about. Can you break those 4 groups down and why they're important?
Absolutely. So I would say gamification runs on motivation. So you really have to tap into the psychological drivers on how individuals are motivated to achieve their goals.
Right.
Because the thing is, they for sure are motivated differently. And there was a pretty renowned scientist named Richard Bartle, professor. He looked at the gaming industry, and obviously gamification is like applying these game-like elements to something that's nothing to do with game, but to create engagement and excitement.
Right.
So there's a big connection here to a sales gamification platform and the gaming industry. So when he looked at the gamers and kind of like what was their motivation to keep playing the game and dedicating so much time in the game, he found out that he could categorize it into four. So you had your killers, and they're typically focused on winning, ranking, direct peer-to-peer competition, being on top of leaderboards. You had your achievers, which focused more on attaining status, achieving preset goals quickly and completely. And then you had your explorers, focused on finding their way to discover the unknown, or to find the best way to kind of close a deal or do it on their terms. But the biggest chunk of people were the socialites, and they were focused on the collaboration. How can you drive and develop a network of friends and contacts and work on something together? So what's interesting when you're bringing this over to the world of sales, I would say
Perfectly transformable.
It's a big linker, right? But it's also maybe more killers in sales. I'm not going to lie. And the killers are, they are the ones who are motivated to be on top of the leaderboards, and they want to show who's the best. And kind of
quota
like
killers, I'm number one.
Exactly. They're like, you always have one of those, like one Joey who's constantly winning every competition you set up, or doing anything that he can do to win. And that's fine. The problem or the challenge starts to be apparent when you want more managers, because you're growing, and we keep on promoting the top performers. In most cases, are killers. So when they become managers and they are starting to think, how can I motivate my team? They will try to deploy motivational tactics that works on them. So they incorporate leaderboards and competitions. Hey, the top 3 performers get these prizes. But when your team is 100 people, I promise you, the big chunk is the socialites. And they know that Joe is going to win anyway. So why should I care about that competition or that leaderboard? Or I just want to do my part. But I really do care that my team has just surpassed their biggest week ever. Like, that's something that's huge for us, and we're going to go out to celebrate. And
record breakers.
Really makes a lot of sense. Exactly. So this now really becomes core to our whole platform. It's like, how can we make sure that there's enough game elements of different types that speaks to all of these different types of individuals, so we can motivate them on an individual level, and make sure that the middle performers are elevated. Because the top performers is always going to be great, and you're always going to have someone you need to performance manage out. But it's the core part of the team. If you get them to move 1, 2, 3, 4 steps up, that's really going to move the needle for the business. And that's where gamification and these player types come into play.
Right. It's bringing up the overall productivity of the team, as opposed to having that one tip of the sword who's constantly carrying the team quarter over quarter or month over month. Now let's broaden that contribution through motivational tactics, which we all know work. It's, accountability and motivation mixed into one. So there's a couple ways to mix this up. And that was the point that I think we talked about in our planning, was that it's about having the right mix in the structure of your contests. Again, goes back to my original questions with you about structuring goals with your marathon. But here you have to have a variety of structures, if you will, within the contest. So team-based versus individual-based, right? Having that blend. And I think what you're saying is, when you have that killer individual on your team, that's always killing, that's that individual contest, that who's going to sell the most, who's going to book the most meetings, outcome-based, individual-based equals the same person over and over and over again. But if you change that formula to team-based and then short versus long durations, right?
That's also a key.
Well, the thing that I like talking about the element of chance, that was my favorite piece of what you talked about, is introducing the element of chance, which really now creates an opportunity for those socialites, those explorers to win as well. Because, again, Johnny Killer is always taking the cake.
Yeah, exactly. And like Billy, who's an achiever, he would love to win a competition, but he knows that Johnny's always going to win. So actually introducing the element of chance from time to time into your competitions as an example of a very powerful game element
Mhm.
is extremely impactful in elevating the middle performers and those player types outside of the killers. So in that case, what we say now is like, all right, for every meeting you book, you get a ticket. So yeah, we tally it up, and Joey's still going to have the most tickets, so he's still going to be motivated. But Billy, suddenly, by booking one meeting, he had a ticket, and when the competition ended, they spin a wheel or they do a draw, right? So suddenly, he might actually win, and Billy can go home to his wife and kids and be like, "Look, what I won at work today. It's
Right.
amazing." And they will feel a lot of like mastery and motivation from this and be very proud. And to your point with team-based competition as well, like you do an individual competition, and then based on the performance, place them into balanced teams and make them work together with individuals they haven't worked with before. The socialites will love it,
I love
and
that.
it's going to elevate the results because the good ones are working with the less so,
Right.
and there's knowledge transfer happening, and
You're
it's just
creating cross-pollination within people who normally wouldn't probably work together. And particularly within larger teams, this is something that, again, has to be a strategic focus in stewarding this type of
yes.
collaboration, right? Because it's not
That's why
just
I
getting
say
the results. It's all,
gamification.
yeah,
It is a strategy. It's not really like a quick fix. Then
right.
becomes more visualization, recognition, which is also impactful and great, and you can have that. But if you really truly want to dig into gamification, you need a customer success manager who knows that and kind of joins in on that quest and say, this is the outcomes, and how do we break that into actions that individuals actually feel they can influence themselves. And let's put in place a wide range of game elements or a gamification plan so that when we measure the outcome of that business outcome, we're going to see a progress month over month over month. And if it doesn't work, we change it up and we try some different types of game mechanics until we find the ones that works for your team.
Right.
So it becomes
Right.
a
Testing
partnership.
it, right.
But
Yeah. So
I
you
would
have
say,
so what you're saying is you have your CS team will work hand in hand with them early on to help drive this to the max adoption that they're ready for at that stage, which
yeah,
is important. So how far do you take it in that realm? Because I mean that could be months of work potentially, I would imagine.
yeah. I mean, we've done this for many years, and we know our customers pretty well. And lucky for us, most of them have similar types of sales processes, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of knowledge that we can reuse. But in a way, we guide our new customers to come on board with the mindset of trying to find one key business outcome they want to influence, breaking into 5 metrics at most. Less is more for human beings. They can't really focus on too many KPIs or metrics at one
Well,
time.
let's take the SDR example because I'm biased. That's what the teams that I work with. So the business
Sure.
outcome, as an example, would be X amount of completed meetings or new SQLs created in the pipeline. That would be an outcome
Yeah.
that we're strategically focused on. But then what you're saying is you need to break that into smaller pieces that are more effort based, and then apply that mix, that myriad of types of contest structures that are then managed and tracked within your platform. So it's breaking those into smaller pieces like number of calls, number of emails, this sort of thing. Is that kind of where you're going with that? Is that what you would typically see?
Yeah, exactly. You make it into a funnel.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about the business outcome, and then you reverse engineer your way all the way back to those actions that they should be doing 40 plus times a day.
Right.
And that's where you want to apply the game elements. That's where you want to create the contests, the leaderboards, the achievements that trigger when they have progress or when they hit certain milestones or when they've done 100 calls 3 days in a row and they're on a streak. Like
There we go.
uh,
Yeah.
these types of things, you want to do that on things they can influence directly themselves. because everyone wants those meetings. Like there's no doubt about it. But like, how do you get there? And by really visualizing that and making that transparent and making them feel accountable for the input, you're going to see output in the end. So yeah, that's the key to success, and that's where we try to guide our different types of customers to really understand their funnel leading back to the action and how they can. Which systems do you track that in? You mentioned Outreach SalesOft. Those are great systems for SDR's team to kind of start everything up by adding context to a sequence. And that then you need to complete your task that's created by that sequence. And those tasks should have 1/3, being cold calls. So indirectly, you're going to do a lot of cold calls. And then finally, hopefully you'll get to those meetings, but you should measure the conversion rates of this funnel as well. And you could even create competitions and achievements. Hey, you had a really strong conversation to meeting booked conversion. You were above 10%. Fantastic.
Which is something they can control. Like literally, that's the most
those
important
types of
metric
game
right
elements.
there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you could, right? It's quality and quantity. There's this old saying that you need to focus on quality, or like at some point we kind of start to say, oh, forget about the quantity. It's all about the quality.
They go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand. You need both. So you absolutely need both. It's
especially in
not
those
only
transactional
about the
models that
quantity,
you're talking about. Yeah, I think it's, in order to sustain velocity, there absolutely has to be a quantity component. Let me ask you this though. You're probably using SalesScreen in ways that a lot of customers aren't using it, right? Some advanced approaches, if you will, right? I don't know what the common adoption rate is across your install base. Let's say, just for shit and giggles here, it's 50%. What are you doing at the top line? First of all, what does that full adoption look like? What's some more advanced ways that you're using SalesScreen in ways that a lot of your customers aren't using it today?
Yeah, good question. I think that being one of the oldest customer, first customer, we've gone through it all. But what we found to be really motivational for a lot of people that I would hope and want to see more customers do is to chain their competitions, kind of build on them. So if you have
stack them up,
yeah, so it's kind of connect them. So I'll take an example. So this month is the month of May. It's the mental awareness month, so mental health awareness month, and because of that, we have put focus on that through running a series of competitions inside my company, focusing on exercise. So the first one, we asked everyone to track their workouts and anything they did in the workout app Strava, which we have a native integration with.
Wow.
And we ran an individual leaderboard. Just how many minutes did you exercise? What they didn't know is that the next week we used that leaderboard to create balanced teams based on who exercised the most, and we changed up the metrics. So now it's not minutes anymore, but it's distance. So we're building on like the initial set to build out an even better team competition now. And then next week, we might take the results again and we're going to tweak it into another.
Keep iterating on the same concept. Yeah, I love that. And then so you're doing this in parallel though to the regular sales oriented and effort-based stuff that we talked about.
Yes,
I didn't even think about that, honestly. Like that's a great idea. I mean, my wife, her brother, and her sister-in-law, the three of them, I don't have the Apple Watch, but they have their little daily who gets the most steps in, and they're like competing with each other. It's funny. And so they have the biometrics going and whatnot. So you're saying you could do something like that, but incorporate them with your team family, your work family, and not even make it about sales now, making it about, just, I love that you had the exercise component and that you just did a marathon. Perfect alignment there.
It doesn't, it does help. I feel like I contribute more to the team than most, so that's good.
Okay.
No, but it's a good idea to switch up what you focus on from time to time. But given that everyone in my company uses it, not only the sales team and SDR teams and CS team, like everyone is on it. It makes it even more impactful because it becomes a company-wide initiative.
Right.
So obviously that's something I would wish more of our customers were doing as well, but that's a cost constraint in it. So
of course, you
I
need to have
understand
licenses
why.
for those
Yeah,
folks or whatnot.
exactly.
But if it's in the office environment, we've got more and more people moving back into offices. We've had guests on here from large organizations that have moved their SDR teams from remote to hybrid or fully in office. So that transition is still underway, but I think there's more and more teams that we're seeing that are getting back into these office environments where they can definitely leverage that. And so I love the fact that you could have HR walking down a hallway and see on the screen that SDR just hit their quota or what have you, and it pulls them into the celebration as well. It's not just the go-to-market sales and marketing team that are celebrating off the dashboards, but now it's holistic within the organization that you're really factoring everybody in. But I asked you what you're doing at the top end. What prevents your customers from getting to that though? Like, why would they not get to a point where they're using the product in a more advanced manner just to drive more strategic motivation and accountability into the business?
I would say probably it's about knowledge constraints. So our platform has evolved over the years to become quite of a beast in terms of flexibility and capabilities. So training even an internal customer success manager on the platform might take quite a lot of time. So we see some customers who have dedicated people that are set to kind of like SalesScreen is your tool, you own it, and you're gonna run motivational incentives and change it up for every quarter. So we make sure that it keeps fresh. They're obviously having even more impact than the ones where this kind of falls across all the frontline managers, or even worse, on the operations person. It depends a bit on how much resources you have as a customer to really spend on this strategy and initiative. Because you will get value from day one by just having the visualization up on the TV screens, pushing the smaller wins that someone just hit their quota or closed a new deal. That should push out on mobile. It should push into Slack, on Teams, on TV screens, everywhere. So you create awareness, you create noise, you create celebration, and that really
unity
builds on their self-esteem for the sales team. So it's really important, and you get that value immediately. So you don't need to go all the way down. But the more you do, and the more you invest in these motivational tactics and gamification, the more performance you will be able to gain.
I would imagine executive leadership, some sort of executive sponsor is a big factor. Having someone in a leadership position that is a big fan of this tool, who's setting priorities for people in frontline management, whether it be sales operations, sales enablement, SDR, salesman, whoever that person is that's going to kind of own the platform, then whoever that person reports to, if they're a big fan, then hopefully they can help prioritize this. Otherwise, you sit around 20 to 30%, you would cater to the killers, and you don't really make the full use of what it can do for your business and how transformative it can be. So I think we've hit on a lot of the important things that I wanted to ask about the product and educating our audience around this topic. In closing, what else are you doing besides using your product to drive revenue at SalesScreen? We've asked this question of other organization leaders like yourself that have products that are go-to-market centric, but we want to know what else is working within your business for that other founder, revenue leader who's trying to understand outside of gamification and these things. You have a whole business to run, so gamification is part of your strategic, and I'm sure it's a pillar in your focus. But what else is working at SalesScreen to move the needle?
Yes, that's a great question, and we could probably talk quite a while about it. But I would say there's a couple of very rudimental things that you need to get right, and we've also failed on this even in recent times. One being knowing your ICP.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds easy, but like it is, it
Yeah, what
might
does
be
that
harder
mean to
than you think.
you? If someone's, yeah, if you hear someone say, know your ICP, what does that translate
Yeah.
to in your mind?
In my mind, it's like, all right, so we're not a vertical tool, we're kind of horizontal. So this can really sell into any industry and any team. So it's like really just picking a lane and sticking with it, but also doing it based on your data. So you need to in the initial beginning, kind of like try out a bit of different things, but then you need to use the data and understand where is your retention best, where are they sticking around,
Lifetime
expanding,
value,
and
profitability. Hmm.
where's the sales velocity high. It's like, and once you start to realize there are segmentations in your customer base that is better than others, those are ideal customers, and you really need to double down on that and build that go to market engine around those ideal customers. And for us, for instance, we already kind of alluded to it, this is more powerful the bigger the company is. So the
Okay.
more people you have to manage and you try to motivate at the same time, that becomes very quickly extremely complex
Right.
compared to if you're like a few people. So for me, strategically right now, we're building up more of a product-led growth engine for the smaller customers, so they can get something which is really, essentially visualization, some competition. They get a taste for it, but they can really handle it on their own. It's very simplified, so it's cheap.
Hmm.
While we focus more on the bigger customers as a collective go-to-market
In your
team.
direct outreach.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So we really focus more on those strategic and enterprise accounts, and because we know they absolutely stick around, and there's a bigger pain point for them because of their scale and size, and it becomes a more valuable customer for us in terms of lifetime value. So it's knowing your ICP and then focusing your go-to-market strategies around that ICP segmentation to make sure that you have the highest impact. So for us as PLG on the smaller side, focus more on the bigger customers. So that's two of the core strategic choices that we have right now.
Very
The
good.
third one being obsess about your customer, really do understand what is it they are struggling with right now, because the world is changing so fast these days. So
Mhm.
make sure that becomes the center of what you do. Don't be feel you're safe, really talk to them, do executive business reviews, change up your gamification plans regularly to align with the business outcomes that might have changed, and make sure that you actually do the work so you're aligned with the
So do you
customer's
have
current
customer
situation.
symposiums or some sort of feedback mechanism? I would imagine you're proactive and customer obsessed
Yes,
yourself. So how often and to what degree are you talking to customers?
I try to be on with customers every day.
Love that.
And that means also talking to my internal team. It means
Mhm.
looking at what the problems are being surfaced on Slack and helping out. It means actually being on the intercom
Right.
and looking at some support requests. It means going out to the customers and meeting with them and understanding what they're doing. But it really is like sticking my nose into
Inserting
what
yourself.
my
Yeah.
customers is doing all the time. Really
Yeah.
helps me align the teams here at SalesScreen. But
Very good.
yeah, for sure, it's an obsession.
I love it. Well, this has been enlightening. And for those that are really serious about gamification, accountability, and motivation in a strategic manner, particularly with sizable teams that are transactional, high velocity, this might be the missing component that you need to really hit that turbo button. So I really encourage you guys to check out SalesScreen. Sindre, where do you want to send people? How do you want them to get in touch with you and the company?
I'm big on LinkedIn, so
Okay.
yeah, search me up on LinkedIn and Sindre Haaland, and hit follow and connect and send me a message.